My claim is that what is today called healthy represents a lower level than that which under favorable circumstances would be healthy, that we are relatively sick. For Friedrich Nietzsche, the question of human flourishing and the nature of mental health, or health of the soul as he refers to it, was a matter of great importance. For he saw it as closely related to what he considered to be the main task of philosophy as such, namely to cultivate and educate a higher, nobler type of human beings, a type that would be, as he writes, more valuable from the perspective of life, more worthy of life, and that would represent a more secure guarantee of the future of humanity. In order to accomplish this task of philosophy, the philosopher must seriously address himself to the question, what is good for the human being, and what characterizes the optimally functioning human mind? On the basis of the answers to these questions, the philosopher can then construct principles of practical ethics that will help achieve this ideal of health. This is precisely what Nietzsche does in his writings, and the answers he provides are truly extraordinary, profound, and fascinating, even from today's perspective. It is not for nothing that Nietzsche is still regarded today not only as one of the most influential philosophers in the history of Western culture, but also as one of the most insightful psychologists, a claim to which Sigmund Freud himself lent credibility when he declared that Nietzsche had achieved a degree of introspection that had never been achieved by anyone. In this video, we're going to have a look at what Nietzsche has to say in his writings about the health of the soul, and try to incorporate his ideas into our own conception of what mental health means to us, so that we may try and help fulfill the main task of philosophy, as Nietzsche understood it, namely, to educate a higher, nobler type of person who would also abound in higher, nobler health. The first fundamental idea that Nietzsche puts forth, not only about the nature of the health of the soul, but of health in general, is that health looks essentially different for each individual person. For each person has a different physiopsychology, and no two people in the world are exactly identical. They are not composed of the same quantum of organic molecules, and do not have exactly the same character or the same body. Because of this, Nietzsche argues in one of his Untimely Meditations that each person is something unique that exists only once in the world, that each person represents an admirably varied diversity which even the strangest accident cannot bring together into unity a second time. For Nietzsche, then, it follows from this fact that we commit a categorical error when we try to apply the standardized, supposedly universally valid notion of health as such to the individual human being, because this standardized notion can never precisely fit an individual's unique physiopsychological constitution and can only falsify and adapt it to the average. For there is no health as such, and all attempts to define a thing that way have been wretched failures, proclaims Nietzsche in The Gay Science. Even the determination of what is healthy for your body depends on your goal, your horizon, your energies, your impulses, your errors, and above all, on the ideas and phantasms of your soul. Thus, there are innumerable healths of the body, and the more we allow the unique and incomparable to raise its head again, and the more we abjure the dogma of the equality of men, the more must the concept of a normal health, along with a normal diet and the normal course of an illness, be abandoned by medical men. For Nietzsche, this means that we cannot rely on any psychologist or self-help guru to tell us what health of the soul consists in precisely for us. Psychologists or self-help gurus can only give us standardized advice on what it usually consists of for most people, but what it means precisely for us is something that only we ourselves can discover. Health of the soul, as Nietzsche understands it, cannot therefore be imposed on us by the advice of other people, but must come from ourselves. We must become the physicians of our own souls, and thus live up to the old philosophical imperatives, know thyself and master yourself, if we want to attain that higher health to which philosophy, as Nietzsche understands it, calls us. There are 1,000 paths that have never yet been walked, 1,000 healths and hidden islands of life. Human being and human earth are still unexhausted and undiscovered, proclaims Nietzsche through the character of Zarathustra. But at the same time he also proclaims, no one can build you the bridge on which you and only you must cross the river of life. There may be countless trails and bridges and demigods who would gladly carry you across, but only at the price of pawning and foregoing yourself. There is one path in the world that none can walk but you. Where does it lead? Don't ask, walk. Since Nietzsche understands the health of the soul in such a subjectivist way, it is not surprising that he considers one of the main defining characteristics of a healthy soul to be an instinctive desire for what is good for it. A healthy soul, according to Nietzsche, differs from a sick or decadent one in that it instinctively, that is, automatically, naturally, by its own taste, desires what is good for it, whereas the sick or decadent mind instinctively desires, prefers, and values what is harmful to it, mistakenly perceiving it as beneficial to its health. A sick, decadent soul will act like a drug addict, giving preference to that which might give it a temporary sense of stimulation, but which ultimately in the long run only weakens its already declining feeling of life. It will, at the same time, perceive its drug as beneficial to its health, not realizing that, in reality, it only contributes to its downfall. This applies to all areas of life where one needs to make judgments according to their taste, from the choice of food and drink, to the choice of company one chooses to surround oneself with, and the information one consumes, like what one reads, listens to, or watches. It therefore applies to both bodily and what Nietzsche calls our spiritual diet. Furthermore, an unhealthy soul will lack the strength necessary to defend itself against things that are unnecessary to it and that only drain its energy and do not contribute in any way to its flourishing. It will selflessly accept and incorporate everything that comes its way, lacking the selfishness necessary for the sincere concern for its highest well-being that will drive it to defend itself from those influences. A healthy soul, on the other hand, will set its bodily and spiritual diet correctly to promote its highest well-being, precisely because it is capable of being robustly selfish towards itself and defending against unnecessary or harmful influences out of a deeply ingrained sense of self-love or self-affirmation, as Nietzsche calls it. This shows itself externally in the healthy persons having a refined taste in virtually everything they come into contact with. It is for this reason that Nietzsche describes the healthy person in the following terms. Only that which is beneficial to him tastes good to him. His liking, his taste, ends where the boundary of the beneficial is overstepped. He can tell what heals him from what does him harm. He uses mishaps to his advantage. What does not kill him makes him stronger. He instinctively collects his sum from everything he sees, hears, experiences. He is a selective principle. He lets a great deal go. Letting a great deal go and being a selective principle is a defining mark of a healthy mind, according to Nietzsche, because it testifies of the mind's healthy instincts, namely its instincts for self-defense and self-preservation. A healthy mind instinctively knows what it needs to thrive and defends itself against everything it recognizes as unnecessary or harmful to its flourishing. Not seeing many things, not hearing them, not allowing them to approach you. First ruse, first proof that you are no accident, but a necessity, writes Nietzsche in Ecce Homo. Healthy instincts command one, as Nietzsche says, not only to say no where a yes would be an act of selflessness, but to say no as little as possible too, since every no, every act of self-defense, so to speak, is an unnecessary expenditure of energy that is best avoided. A healthy person is therefore distinguished by a certain kind of healthy selfishness, that is, by a sincere concern for their highest well-being as such. When this sort of genuine egoism, as Nietzsche calls it, is lacking in a person, it is a truly sorry sight for the philosopher to behold, because that person in their everyday struggles is not being themselves, and is acting upon needs that are alien to their true nature. It is because of this that Nietzsche writes, "For what one has to atone the most? For one's modesty, for having failed to listen to one's most personal requirements, for having mistaken oneself, for having underestimated oneself, for having lost a good ear for one's instincts. This lack of reverence for oneself revenges itself through every kind of deprivation: health, friendship, well-being, pride, cheerfulness, freedom, firmness, courage. One never afterwards forgives oneself for this lack of genuine egoism. One takes it for an objection, for a doubt, about a real ego. This brings us to the second defining feature of a healthy soul, as Nietzsche understands it, namely that the healthy soul is ruled by one dominant passion. When a healthy soul succeeds in selfishly following its tastes during its lifetime, and in resisting distractions that would rob it of its energy and divert it from its natural cause, sooner or later, it will inevitably, according to Nietzsche, come to an epiphany in which it discovers what Nietzsche calls its dominant task or organizing idea, or in other words, the goal, purpose, or meaning of its life. The passion that this task or idea arouses in the soul then overrides all other passions and establishes itself as the dominant one, making the person desire to devote all their efforts to its service. Why is this a sign of health of the soul, according to Nietzsche? Because the dominion of a single sovereign passion is the optimum constitution under which the soul can most effectively be what Nietzsche believes it is naturally driven to be, as an organic, living entity, namely, to be an active formative force that reshapes its environment according to its ends. A soul, organized under one dominant passion, possesses a strong will, because there are no equally strong passions within it that would threaten to overpower the will of its dominant passion. It can thus go fully in one direction in life, and not be dragged one way and then another by its own conflicting passions. In contrast, the unhealthy soul is characterized by the fact that it cannot master its own passions. It cannot establish a firm hierarchy or order of rank among them, and lends them equal rights along the lines of democracy or anarchy. Such a person, then, according to Nietzsche, has no clear style to their character, and is constantly pulled in different directions in life, first by one passion, then by another, depending on which one is currently dominating their soul. A third major defining mark of the health of the soul, according to Nietzsche, is resilience. Resilience, for Nietzsche, means a capability to deal productively with suffering and hardships. For a typically healthy person, Nietzsche says, being sick can even become an energetic stimulus for life, for living more. By being sick, Nietzsche here means not just ordinary physical sickness, but also depressive psychological states of pessimism and existential nihilism. These states induce a deep-seated hatred for life, which leads one to the conviction that life is unjust and therefore has no value and should therefore end or be completely numbed. An unhealthy soul lacking in resilience will be powerless to stop itself from being completely consumed by this attitude when it appears, and will be unable to bounce back from it to a positive, affirmative attitude towards life. A healthy soul, on the other hand, will be resilient enough to overcome periods of pessimism and nihilism and regain a positive attitude towards life. This also applies to the healthy soul's ability to easily deal what Nietzsche calls ressentiment. Ressentiment is a strong feeling of repressed vengefulness towards someone or something one blames for one's suffering. It is what drives people to hold grudges, guilt-trip others, and viciously accuse them of something. It is what makes one see other people as the embodiments of all evil and take one's enemies gravely seriously. Ressentiment can naturally appear in both a healthy and an unhealthy mind, but what makes the difference between them, according to Nietzsche, is how easily the mind can deal with it. An unhealthy mind tends to stew in its frustration for a long time and eventually get consumed by it, whereas for the healthy mind, ressentiment, when it appears in it, runs its course and exhausts itself in an immediate reaction, therefore it does not poison. A healthy mind, on the other hand, is quick to forgive and forget because of an excess of formative, reconstructive, healing power that it naturally possesses, according to Nietzsche. Such a human is simply able to shake off with a single shrug a collection of worms that in others would dig itself in, as Nietzsche writes in the Genealogy of Morals. From all that we have learned in this video, we can summarize that the health of the soul, as it is understood by Nietzsche, is a process driven by the soul's fundamental desire and capability to achieve three ethical goods: self-knowledge, self-mastery, and self-love. It is then the task of practical philosophy in the Nietzschean conception to guide the souls of human beings towards achieving this ideal of health and to support them in their quest for self-overcoming. In this way, philosophy effectively fulfills its main purpose, namely to cultivate and educate a higher, nobler type of human beings, a type that would perhaps finally be able to understand themselves and the world adequately, and thanks to this, become mature enough to live with a sense of joy, strength, and intensity, fruitfully and creatively.